From the inception of the league, all the way up to 1993, Canadian teams would dominate the NHL, as they would go on to win 49 of the 75 Stanley Cups awarded in that time frame. And when you consider that Canadian teams make up a small proportion of the league, this track record was astonishing. By 1970, Canadians made up 96.1% of all NHL players. The NHL, without a question, was Canada's sport. The sheer dominance and representation proved it. However, 1993 was the last time a Canadian team would lift a Stanley Cup.
Canadians win the Stanley Cup!
1993 just so happens to be the same year that Gary Bettman was appointed as NHL commissioner. So the question is, what the hell happened? And this hiring had one goal: grow the NHL game in the US market. And well, that is exactly what he would do. As reported by the LA Times, the NHL in 1990 had total revenues around $450 million. By 1999, revenues had tripled to over $1.4 billion. Yet, even though NHL revenues were exponentially rising, we would see the movement of two NHL franchises. The Quebec Nordiques would be moved to Colorado, and the Winnipeg Jets would be moved to Phoenix. But here's the thing, during this time, yes, each team was seeing financial hardship, but that hardship by no means meant that each team couldn't stay in Canada. No, they were moved because of Wayne Gretzky. And if you're like, Rob, what the hell are you talking about? Well, back in 1988, we would see the most infamous trade in NHL history, as Wayne Gretzky would be shockingly traded to the LA Kings. And this trade wasn't just crazy on paper. No, this trade would cause an immense ripple effect in the States. Having one of the greatest athletes of all time playing in a place like California would lead to Americans who had never seen hockey to become devoted fans overnight. Hell, Austin Matthews has stated that if it wasn't for Gretzky going to LA, he would have never picked up a hockey stick, as this trade would change sports history, as it would prove that there is huge market potential within the States if the cards are played right. It is also no coincidence that Gary Bettman would be named commissioner shortly after this blockbuster trade. Because of this newfound potential, American investors now wanted to own an NHL team. Therefore, they would start making offers to the Quebec Nordiques and Winnipeg Jets. Combine this with the falling Canadian dollar, meant that these offers were way too good to pass up. So to summarize, 10 years after Bettman took over, Canada would lose two NHL teams, and Canadian teams went from making the finals 9 times in the previous 10 years to having a single finals appearance in the next decade. Do I think Bettman hates Canada? No, but his bias for American teams is obvious. And I can definitely understand the sentiment when you consider that everything went south as soon as Bettman was named NHL commissioner. In 2017, we would see the Vegas Golden Knights added to the league. 2021 brought the introduction of the Seattle Kraken, and in the last several weeks, we've been hearing about a potential return of an NHL team back in Atlanta. The same Atlanta that turned into the Calgary Flames, only to get another team back in 1999, but due to problems with drawing an audience, they would eventually turn back into the current Winnipeg Jets. Meaning, if Atlanta does get another team, it will be the third attempt to jam hockey down the throats of the people in Atlanta. But here's the thing, it's not that a team like Atlanta can't succeed. Rather, the success of the franchise is dependent on the performance of the team. The Carolina Hurricanes paint a great picture of this theory. On this graphic, we have the Hurricanes' record history from 2015 up until 2023. Okay, and on this graphic, we have their average attendance in the same time period. And when we overlap these graphs, you can see that their financial success is entirely dependent on their team being good. If they aren't relevant, the team doesn't make money. If they aren't seeing success, a lot of fans just don't care. At the end of the day, the NHL is a business, and the Hurricanes' example is yet again shows that it's in the league's best interest to ensure the success of US teams. Now, let's go back to Atlanta. When they did their expansion draft back in 1999, teams were able to protect an astonishing 1 goalie, 5 defensemen, and 9 forwards, for a grand total of 15 players. Let's think about the optics of this situation. A new NHL franchise in a big city, the people are excited for their new team. But because the expansion draft gave them a glorified AHL team, the Thrashers were horrendous. as fans would lose interest, especially when you consider that Atlanta has an NBA and NFL team, which is without a doubt why the Vegas and Seattle expansion drafts would allow them to have a competitive team on day one. To create fans in an untraditional market, you need success from day one. If you don't, the hype dies and so does the finances of the team. And for some perspective, let's take a look at the Vancouver Canucks. Because from 2015 until 2023, the Canucks would make the playoffs twice in 9 seasons. Disappointing outcomes, coach firings, the fans are distraught. Now let's take a look at their attendance. Yep, win or lose, we have seen negligible changes in their attendance. Yes, there are up and downs, but compared to Carolina, we can see that the Canucks are still making money regardless of whether or not the team wins or loses. So if that's the case, instead of going to Atlanta for a third time, why isn't the NHL's top priority bringing a team back to Quebec City? Well, from an economic perspective, the answer is simple. The Quebec City metro area has a population of 840,000. The Atlanta metro has a population of 6.1 million. Bettman's focus is to grow the game of hockey in the States. The upside of having a population 7.3 times larger, combined with far better expansion draft rules, the NHL sees further expansion in the States as a no-brainer. Now, consider this. The province of Quebec has arguably the most passionate hockey fans in the world, and when you consider that when the Nordiques went to Denver, that the majority of Nordiques fans would transition into Habs fans, adding another team in the province would be counterintuitive to league revenue. Yes, Quebec City can see success, but adding another team would be like starting a Subway franchise one block away from another Subway location. Maybe the one franchise makes $300,000 in revenue. You add another franchise in the same area, all of a sudden, the original franchise makes $200,000 and the new franchise makes $150,000. So overall, yes, the growth is $50,000, but why not start a team in a new city that doesn't already have a franchise? Therefore, the original franchise keeps their revenue, and the new franchise would add another $300K. This is classic corporate cannibalism. Now, older fans will probably disagree with that sentiment, but the Nordiques left Canada nearly 30 years ago. And keep in mind, the NHL is dependent on ticket sales. Maybe some of the older Nordique fans become fans of Colorado, but you always have to consider proximity, and Montreal is the closest team. But no matter how you slice it, Quebec City has an NHL arena. An arena that currently hosts the Quebec Ramparts, who routinely sees, and get this, upwards of 15,000 in attendance, which is 3 times more attendance than the Arizona Coyotes. A minor league team in Quebec City sees more attendance than an NHL team in a billion-dollar league. However, this right here is why we're seeing a massive problem in the growth of Canadian hockey. If Quebec City gets another team, success is predictable. But as we know, Gary Bettman is chasing growth in dollar signs. He views some of these untapped markets as gold mines. From a business perspective, as we have just gone over, most Canadian teams do not need to succeed to be profitable. Now, I'm not trying to throw a stray at the Leafs, but this team hasn't made a cup final since 1967. Yet, their lowerable tickets can easily sell for $500 plus on any given night. Whereas, you can get lowerable tickets to a Florida Panthers game for like $50. A team that just made the cup finals. In Tampa, you can get a lowerable ticket for $90. Tampa Bay is a modern day dynasty, and ticket prices are 1/5 the price of Toronto. Okay, so why does this matter? Sounds like a great thing. If you're running a business where failure still equals profit, there is far less incentive and pressure to ensure that your team is successful in the standings. Just imagine you had a high-paying job, but you had the choice to work or not work, and you'd still make the same amount of money. Many people wouldn't have the incentive to work hard. And this train of thought, without a doubt, can cause Canadian teams to take unnecessary chances through trades and free agency, especially when you consider that many owners have a large say, if not the final say, when it comes to player movement. The Leafs said F the rebuild when they acquired Phil the Thrill Kessel. The Canucks have been saying screw the rebuild for the last decade. The Edmonton Oilers won McDavid, but because their scouts were lacking, they've been struggling with depth, even with a generational player. And you might be thinking, If Canadian teams can endure losing without their owners losing tens of millions of dollars, then why not commit to the rebuild, which has now been proven to have a much higher success rate? The answer is simple. Just like how we viewed the news, negativity gets far more interest than a positive story, and this negativity only gets magnified depending on the market. Things got so bad in Vancouver that Canucks ownership would shut down their team forum. Now, consider this. NHL owners are billionaires. Do you think any billionaires exist who don't have a massive ego? No, definitely not. And so what do billionaires with massive egos hate the most? Losing. When you're in a Canadian market where fans are furious, this will without a doubt cause owners to pressure their GMs to make a competitive team, even if it means skipping steps. As it has been rumored for quite some time, the Canucks ownership has had a strong say in how the team is managed. Canucks in that time frame just so happened to skip many steps as they would force trades and signings. Now, I do think owners do this with good intent, but skipping steps ends up only delaying the process. But that's only one side of the media pressure. The other side is the players. At the start of last season, legendary Twitter user Jay Fresh would conduct a survey to find the most annoying fan base. And in the previous video, I would take 3 of the main perpetrators, where I would sample 15 players who joined the team to see if their production changed when playing in a quote-unquote toxic fan base. And looking at the analytic war, we would see a 12% decrease in performance. Now keep in mind, this is one sample size, but it does shed light on the fact that toxic culture within a team's fandom can have a direct effect on individual performance. And being that Canadian fans are the most vocal and passionate, that passion can quickly turn into toxicity. But it doesn't stop there. A team like Montreal is owned by Bell Media. Bell Media just so happens to be one of the largest controllers of media in Canada. Therefore, when things are going bad and negative media is being pumped out, the Montreal Canadiens are basically hedging their bets, because when the team is doing bad, they are raking in the money from negative media. Now obviously the Canadiens want to be successful, but they can go to sleep much easier, knowing that their media revenue can compensate when times are tough. Which once again highlights that even when Canadian teams are losing, the owners are still winning. In the last several seasons, we have seen how tax advantages can significantly benefit American teams. To put this into perspective, let's take a look at the potential contract of Elias Pettersson. If he signs a contract for just say $12 million over 8 years, this contract would earn $96 million, and of that, Pettersson would have to pay 53.5% of that in taxes. Therefore, Pettersson would ultimately earn $44.64 million. Whereas, if he signed that same contract in Florida, Nevada, Arizona, teams that have no state tax, he would bring home $60.48 million, which equates to nearly $16 million more if he played in a place like Florida versus Vancouver. So what about a reality where Canada considers tax deductions for NHL players, as this is something we see in Russia? But when you consider that Canadian players generate upwards of $500 million in tax revenue in contracts alone, this is not going to happen. But here's the thing, when it comes to teams with no state tax, it's not that players make more money. We see players instead take discounts, which in return gives these teams a big upper hand when it comes to cap management and the ability to create depth. 3 of the last 4 teams to win a cup were in states without state tax. Last season, we would see the battle of no state tax. If we take a look at each contending team in Canada, their issues are blatant. The Oilers and Leafs, who have had the best shot of being championship teams, both lack in goaltending and defensemen. So right now, things are looking grim. But as I went over in my last video about the Wings, perhaps a video I did covering Vegas, each championship creates a paradigm shift. And now that the salary cap is supposed to see a big raise, hope is not lost. Because as a Canadian, we need to see another cup back in Canada. But what do you guys think? What needs to happen in Canada for teams to reclaim the sport? The guaranteed Connor McDavid pack is still in stock, where every pack is a guaranteed McDavid card, with the upside of autos and rookies. And as always, thanks for watching.